I mentioned already that Scotland was another place of great interest for romantic landscape artists, and we have some examples here. You do not have to learn all the names of the artists if you don't feel you need to. You might want to Google their names and see some other examples of their art. What I would like you to remember is which parts of Britain were attractive for artists and why, and basically what aspects of the British landscape were seen as a worthy subject for painters. So here we have a few images of Scotland. Alexander Nasmyth. Here we have a view of Tantallon Castle with the Bass Rock. So again, Scotland has lots of castles, as you know. Some of them in ruined state. So of course they would be attractive, especially if they were positioned on a steep rocky outcrop near the sea with some dramatic landscape, and if you could add weather conditions or a nighttime scene, this was your perfect recipe for a romantic landscape. So Alexander Nasmyth, we have quite a few images of Scotland featuring all these elements. Another one, George Fennell Robson. This is all in the first half of the 19th century, the height of Romanticism. Ben Lomond, one of the beautiful high mountains in Scotland. So we have a Scottish landscape, very wild and powerful. Another one, John Knox, landscape with tourists at Loch Katrine. I mentioned that people in the early 19th century visited Scotland to see the locations of the novels of Sir Walter Scott, and the lake called Loch Katrine was one of such places. So here we have a small group of very small human figures who are described as tourists, and we can assume that these are the tourists who come to see the literary locations associated with the novels, the historical novels of Sir Walter Scott, who is sometimes credited for inventing Scotland with the tartans, with the kilts, with the bagpipes, with the traditional dances, this whole revival of Scottish folklore and specific regional traditions, mostly through his novels. So of course this would attract tourists, and then again this would attract artists. Another one, we have David Roberts, A View of Edinburgh from the Calton Hill. So a view actually showing both the new town, the 18th century modern development at the foot of the high hill, and the old town with the castle on the hill itself. Then I mentioned already that some places are connected with the Industrial Revolution. We talked about them when we talked about UNESCO sites. They were attractive for artists as well. It's not really true that all artists during the Romantic period believed that modernity is horrible, and especially it's not worthy subject for a painting. Actually, some of them were fascinated with new developments, with technological progress, even the kind of scary, sooty side of the Industrial Revolution. So here we have an example of a painting by William Williams, a view of the Iron Bridge, the famous Iron Bridge in Shropshire, the first bridge of its kind. I hope you remember the structure itself. This is just to show you that these new constructions were also attractive as a subject for artists. And we have two more examples, both from Shropshire, so the area in central England where the Industrial Revolution started, and actually showing two places very near each other. One is Bedlam Furnace, here by Paul Sandby Munn, which shows ironworks, the furnace for smelting iron. And here we have an early industrial landscape with the chimneys, with the smoke and the soot, and it's all kind of gloomy and dark, but at the same time strangely fascinating, I don't know, an image of apocalypse, or perhaps an image of the gates of hell. This is scary and perhaps ugly, but at the same time strangely fascinating for many artists. These ones are not really very well known by their names, but if you look at some works by Turner, you can see similar themes repeated. Another one here, Philip James de Loutherbourg, Colebrookdale by Night. Colebrookdale is a village in Shropshire where the early industrial development happened. So here we have another furnace, another ironworks, very near Iron Bridge really, but this time using the well-known romantic technique of the nighttime scene to emphasize the flames and the smoke and this kind of glow of fire in this region. Let me now pass to the two greatest landscape artists of the first half of the 19th century, that is John Constable and Joseph Mallord William Turner. And they are very different, but they kind of complete each other. They show two sides of the romantic painting, and this is what we have in those works. John Constable, they were actually both from the middle class background, so you might say they represented the new dominant social class in the 19th century, the middle class, and they expressed some of the ideals that the middle class found enticing. For John Constable, it was his homeland. He was a son of a miller. His family owned a flour mill in Suffolk, and you may remember when we talked about the counties of England, when we talked about Suffolk, I mentioned the concept of Constable country, and this is the area where John Constable was born, where he grew up, and where he painted many of his famous works, showing the landscape he knew from childhood, so showing his very immediate homeland. So we have the images of Dedham Vale in Suffolk, one of the valleys. They are not dramatic, they are not really sublime. You do not have high mountains in Suffolk. You do not have really waterfalls or anything dramatic. You just have the fields and the hills and some small rivers with locks so that they could be navigable. So we have quite a lot of images of the locks, like here, Dedham Lock and Mill, and another one, Flatford Mill. So here we have the area that was not very much touched by the Industrial Revolution, except for those river works that made those waterworks navigable. It's not the dark satanic mills, to quote Blake from Shropshire. It is a peaceful, calming country that Constable associated with some sort of a rural idyll, the idealized image of childhood and happiness. Probably the most famous of these paintings showing his homeland in Suffolk is called the Hay Wain. The Hay Wain is this horse-drawn cart used for collecting hay from the meadow. And here we have an empty hay wain crossing a ford in a river, so a kind of shallow place in the river, near the place where Constable was born. So it's a beautiful day, and people are working the fields, and basically everything is as it should be. Constable never left Britain. He traveled a little bit in Britain. There is a tragedy behind it, because the woman he married, the great love of his life, was suffering from tuberculosis. So they tried to move to the seaside to improve her health. It didn't really help in the long run. They traveled to Brighton, they traveled to the eastern coast of England, and of course he painted there. So we have some images, like this image of Brighton, but not the fashionable town that was famous for the royal pavilion of the Prince Regent and all the aristocratic holiday makers, but a kind of hard place, a place where the fisher folk worked very hard, where weather could be tricky. So here we have not the pleasure walking pier. You can see it at the very, very far distance. This is the chain pier. This was used for dragging the fishing boats out of the water in stormy weather. And this is exactly what's happening. We have hard-working local people trying to pull out the fishing boats from the water before the coming storm. Unfortunately, Maria Constable died young, leaving him with, 7 children, I think they had together. Very depressed, very, very unhappy. You can see it in some of his landscapes. It is full of ruins, it's full of craggy mountains and dramatic clouds. He was very interested in the clouds, so it's always a good idea to look at the cloud formations in his paintings. What helped him overcome this very dark period in his life was religious faith. He was very religious member of the Church of England. He was actually quite friendly with the Dean of Salisbury Cathedral, one of the clergymen who worked there. So he visited Salisbury many times, and he painted Salisbury Cathedral many times, sometimes for the Dean, as this very famous painting shows. Those little figures that you can see to the left of the painting are the Dean and I think his niece or a young woman from his family, of course the main focus is this beautifully framed Salisbury Cathedral, framed by the trees that form this kind of almost a Gothic arch. Here we have another view from a further distant view with some meadows and the river and the receding storm with the rainbow, which has sometimes been interpreted as a sign of hope. Of course, in the Bible, if you remember, the rainbow is a sign of hope. It's a sign of God's promise for the chosen people of his protection and help. So this is probably some sort of indication that religious faith gave hope to Constable in his bereavement. The last one of his works that I would like to show you shows Stonehenge, a view of Stonehenge, also with the rainbow, so a receding storm with some people visiting the stones. Of course, if you know, both Salisbury Cathedral and Stonehenge are in the county of Wiltshire and relatively near one from another, so he probably visited Stonehenge when he visited Salisbury Cathedral. Let's now move to his greater rival and probably one of the greatest English painters ever, that is Joseph Mallow William Turner, and we'll start with the view of Stonehenge by Turner again. And it's quite interesting. It has some romantic elements like the storm. You can actually see the lightning, and if you look close in the foreground we have a flock of sheep and the shepherd who's lying on the ground, and a very distressed dog is probably howling next to the man. We can assume probably the man was struck by lightning, and the dog doesn't know whether the man is alive or not. We do not know it either, whether he is just stunned or perhaps killed by the lightning. Some of the sheep are also lying around on the ground, which might suggest that there was a crash of lightning, of course connected with the ancient stones of Stonehenge and this whole story of the mystery and prehistoric place and perhaps even magic. So there we go. Turner traveled much more than Constable. He visited many places in England, in Scotland. He traveled to the continent, so he painted in the Mediterranean. He was particularly in love with the city of Venice. So if you want to see more of his works, and especially the works that were not painted showing the views of Britain, by all means Google him, Joseph Mallow William Turner, add, I don't know, Venice perhaps, or Italy, and you'll see his works. And basically he was a very prolific painter, so hey. So I'm just going to show you a little fragment of the works that he produced in his life. So what do we have here? Some views from the north, like Holly Island in Northumberland. So the same location that was earlier painted, as you remember, by Thomas Girton, the man that Turner very much admired and was sorry that he died very young. So once again, this is classical romantic landscape. So we have stormy weather conditions, we have the ruins, we have the craggy mountains, we have the sea. Turner loved the sea, so we have lots of very interesting seascapes and ships and lighthouses, as you'll see in a little moment. We have some small human figures trying to drag out the boats, the fishing boats, from the water before the sea gets too dangerous. So nature overpowering humans, and all happening in northern England. Another image from the north is Bell Rock Lighthouse from Scotland. You may remember it. This was one of the great achievements of early 19th century engineering. This is before Victoria, when the engineers from the Stevenson family actually managed to construct this lighthouse on a very small rocky island next to the coast of Scotland, in a particularly dangerous place. So here we have a storm basically hitting the lighthouse. If you look at the shaft of the lighthouse and the wave kind of circling around it, it's like a hand grabbing the lighthouse. Lots of interesting, really, seascapes. Another one, this time from the south, the New Stone at the entrance of Plymouth Sound. Plymouth and the bay called the Plymouth Sound is in the English Channel, as you hopefully know. So here we have a small rocky island at the entrance to Plymouth Sound. Again, stormy conditions, very dramatic weather, and a small ship being battered by the wind and the waves. Some more examples. Arundel Castle with rainbow. Arundel Castle in the south as well, in West Sussex. Here we have one of the images that actually juxtapose modernity and history. So the old historical seat of an aristocratic family in the background, and in the foreground the bustling commercial port, people working, completely modern then, of course, not now, windmill. So basically industrial and commercial activity contrasted with the old castle. A similar view in the village of Dudley in West Midlands. We have a ruined castle in the background on the hill, and in the foreground we have a very bustling commercial and industrial activity. So West Midlands, the area hit hard by the Industrial Revolution, and this is what Turner saw. He couldn't be more I would say, melancholy, like this little village of Dunwich in Suffolk, which looked like a ghost on the hill. Again, nighttime, stormy weather, a group of people trying to fight with the sea, and behind them the hill with this ghostly looking little village, which was actually in great danger of being washed into the sea. The hill was made of sand and soft stone, so basically this was an abandoned village, and I think now it's just a few ruined remains of the houses, because the wind and the storms have destroyed the village completely. Let us now move to the second half of the 19th century, the Victorian period, and later, and to see which parts of Britain were inspirational for artists then.